Recently, Protestant apologist James White has called Redeemed Zoomer a heretic. And assuming that James White does indeed exist, he's proving a point in a video that I just made yesterday. So we're going to take a look at that. But before I go into this any further, I would just say a couple things. I wish nothing but the best for James White and for Redeemed Zoomer both. I've had interactions with both of them, and Redeemed Zoomer seems like a genuine young man. Obviously, I think he's wrong about some things. I'm Catholic, he's not. So without even needing to state anything else, obviously we have our disagreements, but he seems like a young man who is sincerely seeking God's will for his life. And so kudos to him for that. I was probably nowhere near where he is in my faith when I was his age. So good on you, Redeemed Zoomer. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I pray that one day we are united under Rome, but that's what I want. And as far as James White goes, I wish him nothing but the best. But to Redeemed Zoomer, I would just caution you to interact with him because he seems to be a professional gaslighter. He'll say things like, Ignatius of Antioch might not have existed. I hope he did, but maybe. And then somebody will respond by saying, wait, you don't think Ignatius of Antioch exists? And then he'll respond by saying, you're crazy. That's not what I said. There's something wrong with you. So just be aware that James White does not seem to be an interlocutor of good faith. I would wish nothing but the best for him. But at the same time, he's not the type of person you want to interact with. And there's a reason that people are encouraging, even Catholics are encouraging James White to continue his ministry. It's because the points that he makes and the way that he makes them are sometimes so absurd that it shakes people out of the slumber that they're in regarding Christianity and forces them to encounter either Catholicism, the truth, or just run completely into left field with crazy people. So that being said, I hope that Redeemed Zoomer and James White both end up in heaven with me. That's what I'm praying for. But now let's take a look at this beef between them. And this gets pretty interesting. It's not exactly a perfect example of Christian charity, so be warned. But here we go. So this is basically what happened. James White, who is this guy on Twitter, accused Redeemed Zoomer of being a heretic because Redeemed Zoomer does not think that you must believe in Sola Fide, which is one of the Protestant doctrines, means faith alone. He doesn't think you must believe that in order to be Christian. And James White says you must believe in Sola Fide in order to be Christian. So that's the disagreement they're having, and James White called Zoomer a heretic for this. And Redeemed Zoomer responded by saying, apparently, James White thinks I'm a heretic for not thinking you must believe in Sola Fide to be Christian, and that Catholics/Orthodox are Christian. Would he say the same thing about someone like Gavin Ortlund, who also thinks that? So what's going on here? There's basically two Protestants who are having a disagreement about if Catholics are Christian or not. And Redeemed Zoomer is appealing to the authority of somebody who he perceives to be above him in the Protestant apologetics chain, which is Gavin Ortlund. So we have these two juggernauts, celebrities maybe, in the Protestant apologetics realm, which are James White and Gavin Ortlund. And Redeemed Zoomer is saying, look, I follow this guy and you are your own guy. And what if you two fought each other rather than me just fighting you? So he's making here basically an appeal to authority. He's making an argument from authority. Okay, so that's the start of it, but this is where it really starts to pick up. Redeemed Zoomer then tweets and says, Roman Catholics are Christian. Sorry, James White. I agree. I think that not saying that Catholics are Christians is just absurd. We are the original Christians. But this is what James White says in response. And this is something James White always does. He'll write a giant paragraph making an argument from authority. But here's the crazy part. He makes an argument from his own authority. Watch this. I'll break it down here in a second. And this is one of the reasons that James White is, as far as Protestant apologetics go, James White is the best gaslighter out there. It is a skill, and he has it. But this is what he says. I doubt you've read the Roman Catholic controversy or listened to any of the 40+ debates I have done with leading Roman Catholic apologists, so I won't invest time in attempting to repeat all that is said there. You fail to show serious interaction with the topic. Your statement is itself utterly absurd. All Roman Catholics are Christian? Really? Are all Presbyterians Christian as well? As normal, you fail in making clear categorical distinctions. The issue is not individual Roman Catholics. I cannot discern their heart, nor can you. The issue is the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church. At least that can, to a lesser extent, after Francis, be officially determined. This allows us to examine actual teachings in the light of God's revelation, as we are commanded to do, Galatians 1. So, as I explained before you were born, the issue whether... oh man, guys. Okay, so what's he doing here? He's appealing to his own authority, the 40+ debates he's done. He's appealing to his own age and apparent wisdom. And he's saying, you're not engaging with the topic seriously. He's not engaging with the topic at all. All James White is doing is appealing to his own authority and showing you're a 20-year-old, you don't know anything. I'm 40+ years deep into this. I've been debating since before you were born. I know what I'm talking about. He is a professional gaslighter. And if you interact with him on Twitter, do not fall for it. He's just trying to make you look bad. He is not a sincere interlocutor, at least as far as I can tell. Okay, let's get back to it. Where was I? So as I explained before you were born, the issue is whether the Roman Catholic system teaches the gospel of Jesus Christ so that following those teachings will bring you peace with God. The answer to that is a plain no. If you can close your eyes to such hideous perversions of the grace of God as Indulgentiarium Doctrina, which is the doctrine of indulgences, or the astonishing words of such doctors of the church as Logori, well, I leave you to the resultant blindness and darkness of such a course. But for those of us who are serious about bringing the gospel into the darkness of false religion, even that which proclaims itself superior to the scriptures in authority, we will continue to think clearly, reason clearly, and proclaim clearly. I hope someday you will mature to the point of understanding these issues as well. My reference to you was your statement that Sola Fide and PSA are not definitional of the gospel. We are not presenting the same message to the world if your gospel, whatever it is not defined by Christ alone, grace alone, faith alone, through the perfect redemptive work of Father, Son, and Spirit, whereby the Son took the sins of God's people upon himself, became sin, so that they might become the righteousness of God. May I suggest that you are indeed very foolish to be pretending to view yourself as some kind of missionary to the dying liberal denominations when you lack such basic competence in the foundational elements of the gospel itself. And then Redeemed Zoomer, this is a fire response, by the way, RZ. If you're watching this, I appreciated this one. I liked it, actually. See, right there. RZ says, maybe try winning one of those 40-plus debates for a change and get back to me. So what's going on here? Well, RZ and Whitebeard, who's James White, are having a disagreement about the definition of Christian. In order to be a Christian, must you submit to sola fidei, sola scriptura? Are these essential doctrines? Is this an essential part of what it means to be a Christian? What does the word Christian mean? That's essentially what they're arguing about. And James White has a very strict definition of Christian, which is wrong, that you must submit to, it seems like the 5 solas is basically what he's referencing, more or less. And RZ is saying, no, you can be a Christian and still not hold to sola fidei, or possibly even sola scriptura. So who has the right to interpret the word Christian? And I'm going to clear all that up for you in just a second, explain why this proves my point from the video I made yesterday and why everybody watching this should be Catholic. If you're not, this proves it right here. But before I do that, one more thing that happened to RZ and James White. So Redeemed Zoomer blocked James White, and I can't say that I blame him. I personally don't block people just because I don't spend a ton of time on Twitter, and emotionally mean comments don't get to me. It just doesn't bother me. So I don't ever block people, but he did, and I don't blame him. And James White took a picture of that and said, someone took his ball and went home. Seriously, who are the adults in this kid's life? He needs someone to show him the way to adulthood and maturity. Might I recommend that he choose someone other than you, James White, to model his maturity after? So what's going on here? Well, first of all, I just want to say this is probably the most aggressive video I've ever made, and I am very, very open to giving people as charitable of an interpretation as possible. I think Redeemed Zoomer is working with what he's got. I think he's obviously incorrect about some things. As we said, I'm Catholic, he's not, so it's fundamental, obvious that we disagree about things. But as far as I can tell, he's a man of goodwill, and he's working to pursue the truth to the best of his ability, and those are the cards that he's dealt right now. So be it. I want to give James White the same interpretation, the same grace, but he's making it very difficult to the point where he's belligerently gaslighting people, saying to Redeemed Zoomer, who's 22, I think he might be 23, I don't know. He's in his early 20s though, married, seems to be living out the gospel to the degree that he can, like I said. I want to give James White the same grace that I give Redeemed Zoomer, but over and over again, James White is belligerently coming after Catholics with false arguments, failing to make basic distinctions, intentionally misrepresenting the Catholic viewpoint. So you have to either conclude that James White is mentally ill and he's just incapable of understanding what Catholicism actually teaches, or that he is not a man of goodwill. You have to conclude one of those two. And over again for the past 40 years, it's been the same story. So when a man is obstinately opposed to the gospel and blatantly proclaiming falsehoods, then he deserves to be called out with a little more severity and a little more harshness. So James White, if you're watching this, I have nothing but love for you, brother, but you need to repent. And I would encourage you to retire from public ministry, because although you try to bring people to Protestantism, you actually succeed in leading good and reasonable people, the elect of God, into Catholicism. That's what you're doing. I mean, go back and you can talk about whatever debate you want. The first one that comes to my mind is the Sola Scriptura debate between Voice of Reason, and I'm not talking about Voice of Reason in this video, but this is just the first debate that pops into my mind, between Voice of Reason and James White. You look at that debate, and overwhelmingly, I mean, Protestants and Catholics agree that Voice of Reason cleaned up in that debate. It wasn't even close. And then you're going to go and reference debates that you've done in the past, like your one with Joe Heshmeyer, where once again, Protestants and Catholics basically unanimously consent that Joe won that debate. It wasn't close. You're going to go back and cite those debates as your authority? No. That's not going to work, James. Come on. So if you're watching this, say a prayer for James White. I think that he has more going on than we're aware of. Every man is fighting a great battle, and James White is no different. He's in a battle for his soul, and he needs our prayers and our help. So God bless him. Please pray for him. But how does this beef between a couple Protestant apologists, 2 or 3, depending on if you count Gavin as involved or not, how does this beef prove my point that I made about Catholicism the other day? It's really simple. Listen, you have to get this right. In order for people to be united, as Jesus prayed for in John 17, in order for there to be one kingdom of God that Jesus himself established, you have to agree at least upon these 3 things. That is, who's the lawmaker, the legislator, who's the law interpreter, the judge, and who's the law enforcer, the executive. If you don't agree upon who those 3 are, who holds that office, then you cannot be a part of the one true kingdom, because you're necessarily divided, and that's not what Jesus wants. Just read John 17. Now, obviously, these 3 positions can be held by one person. In a monarchy, the king is the lawmaker, the law enforcer, and the law interpreter. But the point is, regardless of if it's one person or 3 separate people or 3 groups of people that hold these positions, in order for a kingdom to be one, you must agree about who has these authorities. Who has the authority to write the law? Who has the authority to interpret the law? And who has the authority to enforce the law? In this case, James White and Redeem Zoomer, they agree about what the law is. They agree about the 66 book canon of Scripture, but they disagree about who has the authority to interpret it. James is saying, I can interpret it this way and condemn Catholics as not being Christian. And Redeem Zoomer is saying, I can interpret it this way and say that Catholics are indeed Christian. So they have a fundamental disagreement about the interpretation of the law. Therefore, they are divided. Now, let's hypothetically say that James White and Redeem Zoomer were both Catholic bishops. This is what would happen. Redeem Zoomer would say, I interpret it this way. James White would say, I interpret it this way. And then they would both have recourse to the Pope, who, in the case of the Catholic Church, is the one with the ultimate authority to interpret the law. And then the Pope would say, yes, James White is right or wrong, or no, Redeem Zoomer is right or wrong. And then the problem would be settled, and you'd be able to maintain that unity. Because Protestants, since they don't agree about who has the authority to interpret the law, they're always trying to balance truth and unity. And Joe Heshmeyer made this point beautifully in my interview with him. But let's say that James White and Redeem Zoomer want to keep unity with one another. Well, they just say, well, this is not a salvific issue. This is not essential to the gospel. Let's just agree to disagree, and let's maintain this unity. That's option number 1. That clearly is problematic for 1,000 different reasons. If you and I don't agree about the basic components of the faith, we're not really united in faith. But the other side of that is, let's say that they prioritize truth over unity. Well, Redeem Zoomer, in his interpretation of the Bible, thinks he has the truth. And James White, in his interpretation of the Bible, thinks he has the truth. So what are they going to do? They're going to say, I have the true gospel. I have the true gospel. They're going to butt heads and eventually split. That's the way it always works. In order to maintain truth and unity, you need an authoritative, infallible interpreter of the law. And this is what Protestantism is lacking. Let me just close by saying, God bless James White. God bless Redeem Zoomer. I sincerely hope and pray that each of them become holier than me and closer to Jesus than I am. It shouldn't be that hard. I'm not a very holy person. And we as Catholics, whenever we go into these apologetic arguments, need to do our best to assume the best about our interlocutor and to treat them charitably. Because since we have the fullness of the truth, we have the burden of the truth more than anybody else. And the way that you and I comport ourselves must reflect Christian understanding, a Catholic understanding of the gospel. We must be patient and kind and ready to defend the hope that is within us. So sincerely, as you guys are finishing up this video, just don't watch another video yet. Just pause the video for a second, say a quick Hail Mary for Redeem Zoomer and for James White and for their conversion to the fullness of the truth. And after you get done doing that, if you want to see an interview I did with Joe Heshmeyer where he just brilliantly explains the papacy, then click on this video next. God bless.